This video will contain spoilers for Infinity War, as well as the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole. You have been warned. The MCU is easily my favorite film franchise of all time, but when comparing it to the comic books which it originates from, there are many differences, both good and bad, and today I'm going to be talking about some of the good ones. More specifically, my top 10 favorite changes. Number 10, Trevor Slattery. Now, let me start off by saying I am not claiming what they did with the Mandarin was good. Just merely that I liked the character of Trevor. When watching Iron Man 3, there is no way that you could predict that the Mandarin is merely an actor. I guess you could say that you'll never see it coming. Not many movies have revealed with that same level of shock, and quite frankly, I just really like Trevor.
They gave me plastic surgery. They gave me things.
Did you just nod off? Hey.
Now that I got that one out of the way, moving on. Number 9. Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are not mutants. In the comics, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are mutant twins and the children of Magneto, and then they weren't. Comic books are confusing. You just kind of have to roll with it. But, obviously, when they were introduced into the MCU in Age of Ultron... actually, they were introduced in the mid-credit scene of Winter Soldier, but, anyway, you may continue. Okay. Anyway, as I was saying, when they were introduced, Disney did not have the rights to X-Men or mutants. Despite that, they did a very good job at introducing the twins and their powers. I love the conversation that goes on between Cap and Maria Hill.
File says they volunteered for Strucker's experiments. It's nuts.
Right. What kind of monster would let a German scientist experiment on them to protect their country?
We're not at war, Captain.
They are.
We can really see that Cap understands why the twins would volunteer for the project, because he did it himself, and I think this really fleshes out the characters more than them just being mutants would. Number 8, Aunt May. If you know anything about Spider-Man comic books, then you know that Aunt May is not young. At all. But in the MCU, Aunt May ain't nearly as old. Yes, Marissa Tomei is 53, but 1, she looks younger, and 2, Aunt May in the comics looks like she's at least 70. It never really made sense to me how Peter could have an aunt who's so old, and I guess I just really like the relationship that Peter has with Aunt May when she is younger. She's more of the fun aunt and less of the grandma. In my opinion, most of the scenes with her would not work nearly as well if she was old. And if it was just the same movie, but she was older, then Tony would just be creepy.
Hey, May. How you doing? What are you wearing? Something skimpy, I hope. Forget that's inappropriate.
Well, I'm not saying he's not creepy anyways. Number 7. Zemo. In the comics, Helmet Zemo, or Baron Zemo, is a Nazi who is working on Adhesive X, a super glue that never wears off. But then, during a fight with Captain America, the vat of glue broke, causing his mask to be permanently adhered to his face. This is certainly a bit different from his appearance in Civil War. I love his comic book representation, but I just really don't think it would have worked at all in that movie. I love the story they build for him with his family in Sokovia, and I really think it makes him understandable as well as fits really nicely in with the theme of that movie. Number 6. Peter Quill's father. Peter Quill is one of my favorite Marvel characters, and in both the comics and the movies, he is only half human, but the other half is where we find a difference. In the comics, Peter's father is Jason of Spartax, while in the movie, however, his father is Ego the Living Planet, which is a bit of a stray, but a great story nonetheless. I think that the villain being Quill's father really adds an extra level of depth to one of my favorite movies, and I actually know very, very little about Jason, so I'm going to move on before I get something wrong. Number 5. Donald Blake. Thor has a very different origin in the comics and the movies. In the comics, Thor is sent to Earth by Odin, transformed into a human by the name of Donald Blake, and stripped of all his memories. He is on Earth for over 10 years before he discovers his true identity. In the movies, however, it's a little different. He is still sent to Earth by Odin, but he's not stripped of his memories, and this leads to a number of really funny moments.
This drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
Personally, I really like the story when he has memories, and the movie even gives a nice nod to the comics. Number 4. Thanos is not basically invulnerable. Infinity War is just such a good movie, and one of my personal favorite scenes is when Iron Man is fighting Thanos. The two are going back and forth, and then Iron Man punches Thanos in the face and gives him a small cut. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was watching this in the theaters for the first time and saw this part, I was celebrating in my head like, yes! He hurt Thanos! But then Thanos had to go and say,
All that for a drop of blood.
and I was like, oh yeah. Crap! This scene is pretty awesome, but in the comic books, I think it would have been different. Thanos in the comics is much more powerful. He has cosmic powers as well as a personal force field, so yeah, I don't really think Tony would be exactly making his face bleed. But for the movie, I think it's much better having him be able to get hurt, because this gives a sliver of hope for the heroes. But then, oh yeah. That happened. Number 3. Scott Lang is Ant-Man. Ant-Man is one of my favorite comic book characters, and unlike most people, I actually knew who he was before the movie came out. But I was surprised to find out that Ant-Man would be Scott Lang and not Hank Pym. In the movie, Hank Pym is very important, but he's not Ant-Man anymore, and that is kind of different from the comics. In the comics, Hank is much closer in age to Tony and Cap. Guys, I'm just realizing as I'm filming this that he is not close in age to Cap because Cap was frozen, but he seems young and I didn't think about that, so... And he is a founding member of the Avengers. Scott Lang does eventually become Ant-Man in the comic books, but only after he steals Hank Pym's suit in order to save Cassie. I really like how in the movie Hank chooses Scott to become Ant-Man, and he is his mentor in that role. Paul Rudd as Scott was also very refreshing. He's smart, but not smart like Tony or Banner. He'll do the stupid thing, but he still knows what he's doing. To some extent. Number 2. Tony Stark created Ultron. Speaking of Pym, in the comics, he was also the one who created Ultron. He built him as a robotic servant, programmed with his own brain patterns. But Ultron rebelled and made it his mission to destroy all of humanity. He slowly upgraded himself until he got to Ultron 5, which is a lot similar to what he looks like in the movie. In the movie, however, Ultron is built by Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, and he is programmed with the Mind Stone. As you watch the movies, you see Tony's PTSD in Iron Man 3, and then the vision that Wanda gives him in Age of Ultron, and I really think it just fits very nicely in with his arc that he's the one that creates Ultron. He wants to be able to save the world, but he accidentally ends up creating a major villain. So then, leading into Civil War, you can really see why he would side with the government, and, as he says, be put in check. Also, if Hank was a member of the Avengers at that time, I really don't think he would have gone behind the team's back in order to create Ultron. But that is something which is very much like Tony. Number 1. Coulson. My favorite TV show of all time is Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and that show would certainly not be complete without Agent Philip J. Coulson. But he was actually introduced into the movies before the comics. When Coulson was introduced in 2008 in Iron Man, he was an original character. He then continued to show up in the following movies, and then finally in 2011, he was introduced to the comics. He was then in Avengers, starred in a TV show, and will supposedly be in Captain Marvel. Clark Gregg does such an amazing job in this role, and Coulson is easily one of my top 10 favorite Marvel characters. Well, that's my list. What'd you think? I'm certainly no expert, so be sure to let me know anything I missed or got wrong down in the comments. Also, let me know what your favorite changes are. And I will be making a list of the top 10 worst changes, and that will be coming out this Friday, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, be sure to leave a like, and I'll see you next time.